Welcome to another edition of Top Lines and Tails. This week we're sponsored by Harbro, manufacturers and suppliers of quality livestock nutrition.
And this week I'm speaking to a friend, sheep breeder, commentator and all-round good guy, Scott Brown from East Lothian, just south of Edinburgh. Hi Scotty, it's great to have you on the podcast at last.
Hi Andy, thanks so much for having us on.
No bother, you and I go back a while. And you cut your teeth at your parents' place at Stonefield Hill, of course the family being well known as early Texel sheep breeders, as well as winning just about every fat stock competition in the land. That was some pretty good grounding for you, I guess.
Yeah, fairly good baptism if on reflection, I suppose, Andy, both on the commercial side of things and the pedigree side of things with the Texels and the Suffolks. So that kind of was where the bug kicked in, I suppose.
Uh-huh. And you and I met through a mutual friend in the 90s, I think it was, Scott.
Yeah, Mark Riddle, he's got a lot to answer for, Andy, hasn't he?
How's he doing? I'm doing a while. Just tell him I was asking for him if you see him.
Yeah, well, no, Mark's doing really well, actually. He's doing great.
And you and he would learn speaking through the Young Farmers movement going back the way. Which club was that you were in together?
Mark and I were both in the South Mid Lothian Young Farmers Club. We weren't ever in the same speech-making team because Mark's a little bit older than me, as obviously everybody knows. But I definitely looked up to him because his elocution and his delivery on most things is excellent, as you know. And yeah, learnt a lot from Mark. He was superb, actually.
The Young Farmers, for some of our overseas listeners, but it's a fantastic movement, and it all these things that it brings to the youngsters, but to be given the opportunity to learn how to speak and speech making, and I think Mark went on to train some of the younger speech teams as well, didn't he? I mean, it's a great grounding for any youngsters, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, Andy. I mean, Mark, we were very lucky, actually. We had a gentleman called Andrew Lorraine Smith from Hagbray. He was our trainer, and he would have trained a lot of young farmers, actually, over the years. Mark and myself included in that number. And yeah, the Young Farmers is a fantastic organisation. It pulls together lots of skill sets that stand you better and well in life, after that, once you've left. Not to mention the power of drinking.
and the speech making competitions, I think you guys would have gone on, and it was a national thing throughout Scotland, wasn't it? You guys would have gone on and
yeah, we both got to national speech making level. I never won. I think Mark did, but we never won. We were close, but got no cigar. But hey ho, it's the taking part that counts in the crack, isn't it?
Sure, and you'd probably be involved in stock judging, and again, the stock judging, you do need to be able to stand there and speak in front of a judge, and the speech making stands you in that good stead, doesn't it?
You do, Andy. It's quite a daunting thing to be standing in front of people and giving your reasons in a room where you've got a time scale and you've got P's and Q's to mind and work your way through diligently through your reasoning behind your placings. But I think that as a judge later in life, that actually stands you in good stead as well. When somebody comes up to you and said, "What was wrong with my sheep?" or "What was wrong with my beast?" That you put it down the line, and usually you have to be forewarned is forearmed, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think a professional delivery, which is given to you, establish when you're in Young Farmers, goes a long way to helping you.
It does, and as a good orator yourself, I guess that's what led you into the commentary side of it. And when and how did that get started there, Scott?
It actually kicked off about 2010 at Dalkeith Show, Andy. The sheep convener retired, and I took over in 2008. And Dalkeith Show, one of the top sort of sheep sections, I suppose, in southeast of Scotland. I think at its peak we had more sheep than the Royal Show on the last year of the Royal Show, which, whether it was rightly or wrongly, whether that was a hard thing to do or not, but we had 550 sheep that year. And we just needed to sort of revamp things a little bit, just because it suffered a little bit from the Irish bean culture. It had always been in the same part of the show field, and the car park was central to the show field. So the first thing we did was, when I became sheep convener, was get my handle on things for the first couple of years. And then I just thought, I've been a great admirer of Dan Buglis, the late Dan Buglis, who always used to do commentary at the Border Union show. Uh-huh. And I always admired his delivery and his knowledge of the industry and his knowledge of people as well. And I think in many ways that's what made it interesting for people to listen to Dan, because it was more than just reading out who won what. He was able to link things together, and also for people who were less informative about the industry, if you were at the show for the day and didn't know much about sheep breeds, he was actually entertaining for people that were just standing by watching and didn't know anything about the people or the sheep or the breeds. So yeah, I think it's a combination of both things. I admired Dan Buglas, and then I thought, let's get going with some commentary at Dalkeith and take things to another level if that's possible. So we started that, and then my brother and myself presented a trophy for the pairs competition, because I always liked that when it was done at the Royal Show. I admired that as well. So there's now a very good pairs competition that runs after the single interbreed competition at Dalkeith Show. And I think that's, depending who your judge is, if you get your paperwork and your ducks all in a row, you sort of say to the judge beforehand, look, I've got a lot of information to read out here, don't go too fast, keep an eye on me, and remember, listen to where I'm at, and don't rush on. We've had a couple of judges who've forgotten that and just rushed, reading things out quite quickly, or in some cases missing out a few lines just to try and get to where you need to do. But hey, that's all part and parcel of commentating, isn't it?
It is, and you brought me in with a baptism of fire. My first commentating job, you brought me into the Royal Highland Showcase event this year to help commentate on the sheep, and I had a lot to live up to with the Jack and Victor show in front of us, but Andrew Goldie and I gave it a good shot, and I learned a lot there. And as you said, I think I commentated on the interbreed pairs one day, and you're exactly right that the guy rattled through them, and I think we were reading the sheep out from the other end that he was judging them from. So there's a lot. But as you said, be prepared is forewarned. How do you think the Highland Showcase event went, Scott? What did you make of it?
Well, I think like everybody was initially when it was laid on, it was a new concept. It was going to be a new thing, very much rushed through, and there was a lot of raised eyebrows as to whether this would be a success, whether people wanted to be part of it, and also the uncertainty of COVID, whether it would still get to go ahead, because new variants obviously can skip the brakes on things if we get another big outbreak. And I think they did a phenomenal job, Andy, if I'm honest. From a standing start of the show being cancelled in late February, to putting a general consensus opinion out in March, to actually kicking things off in the beginning to mid-April, and getting all the entries back in by middle of May, to then setting a whole show up and running it a month later, to the scale they did, I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And also, when you actually speak to some of the directors, when you speak to Simon Cousins, who was his media company actually ran the showcase, the screening of the thing, broadcasting of it, they had standard operating procedures to write out to satisfy the Scottish Government that health and safety wasn't going to be an issue from a point of view of COVID. So they had to do SOPs for things like taking a sheep out of a pen, putting it back in again, showing a sheep. Every stone had to be unturned, and basically nothing was left to chance. And I think they did a phenomenal job.
I totally agree with that, and I watched some of the, should I say, the comprehensive coverage of the evening before they then cut it to just the highlights, if you like. And it just seemed to be brilliant, and all these screens going on, all these different places going on, and anybody's interested in anything, we're getting a pretty good coverage, I would say. And do you think that's something that's going to move on, Scott? I mean, I thought it was brilliant, and I've said to them, you should do that every year, but has that got a place in the event in future Highland shows, do you think? Or does it detract?
Well, I remember when Jack and Victor and the two Andys had a confab at the end on our last day, when we hit the last cut and we hung the mics up for the year. We're all buzzing on adrenaline at the time because it was just such a rush. It was brilliant to be part of it all. The overwhelming wave of opinion from our point of view was they have to do this. It's not something that's come and gone. Given the success of it, I know Simon Cousins told me, Andy, that they had pitched it to a lot of people who were sponsoring the event, that they would be expecting about 100,000 hits on the live stream. Now they've actually achieved something like 280,000 views, which was phenomenal, which actually spoke volumes for the appetite for it. I think they did a fantastic job. I think that is there a place for it going forward? Absolutely. I think there's been people who have engaged in the Highland Show that perhaps wouldn't have engaged in it or watched it in the past because that facility has not been there. Now, having reflected on it, Andy, will it be a thing going forward? From a commentary point of view, it's very different standing in the ring and commentating to people that are around the ringside on what's going on in the inside of it, as opposed to commentating to people in the general public who are actually watching on the telly. Mm-hmm. Because your depth of knowledge, you could be seen as being a little bit condescending to people if you're in the middle of the ring in terms of the level of knowledge you're going to pitch it at.
Sure.
And if you're in the ringside, you're going to rein back a little bit on that because people know a lot about what's going on in the ring. Whereas on the telly, you're actually commentating on. So there's things that we said in commentary that you wouldn't actually say in the ring because it's a little bit condescending, or it's a little bit old hat to most of the people around the ringside at the Highland Show. But no, I think it's got a place. I think it went really well. The feedback's been brilliant on it. I mean, you saying that you were new to the commentary job, you did it like you were a Scottish rugby player with 50 caps under your belt. It was you absolutely done that before, Andy. So well done.
Without the bruises. But I hear what you're saying. But I think one of the issues maybe was there that the commentary we were talking on TV wasn't being heard by the people around the ring. So I suppose that's probably in some ways a good thing. So there maybe is a chance for this to be. And I suppose, looking at other shows, aside, really looking at other, I've been going to the Royal Welsh Show for ever, and I don't know if you've ever been down there, Scott, to the Royal.
Yeah, you were the first one, Andy. You know,
I probably was, and they run the TV commentary.
Yeah, S4C
every day, and throughout the show on all the events, and they've always done that. And one of the issues was, I think, with the Highland Show, that some of the directors kind of thought that if we put too good a coverage on the TV, then folks wouldn't go to the show because they'd stay at home and watch it instead. But I think the Royal Welsh Show gives an example that they still get more people through the gate at the Royal Welsh Show than all the other shows in the UK put together, I think, and that goes out on national TV. So
yeah, I agree with you, Andy. I think there's a place for both of them. Yeah, I'd be sceptical about whether. Well, initially I thought, well, if you put a live feed on, is that going to reduce the numbers through the turnstiles and so the gate money for the Highland Show? But no, I think you might get people watching the highlights at night, or if they can't make it in for the judging, they might come into the show at some stage but not make it in the judging time, and it probably gives them an opportunity to watch it.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
I mean, you go to a show like the Highland or the Royal Welsh, and you can't get to see all the events at the same time, so you can tune into some of those, especially if they stay online for a week or two afterwards, which they are. Yeah.
One thing I did feel very privileged as a commentator was, what a cracking view you got a bird's eye view of what the judge's view of the stock, didn't you?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you certainly did, and that
was great.
Commentating rather than being a mile away when you've got a monitor that's actually shining right on the beast.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe a few other shows could take the same route. I'm not sure. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of guys like Robert Smith. He does live streaming for the likes of the Limousines, and I think he maybe live streams the Blueface Leicesters and the Beltecs as well. So there's a bit of that goes on anyway, Andy, at the Highland Show every year. You just probably could do with. I don't know what the cost is of that, if I'm honest. I know the cost of doing the Highland Show one was monumental, and I think without question, without funding for that again in another years, it's probably the cost would be too prohibitive to run it at the scale they ran it at this year.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think that there may be hope for a scaled down version of that, and maybe on sort of simpler scale.
First class.
Scale it down. Let's move on from that Highland Show and talk about sheep, Scott. And we mentioned your grounding with Texels, but you and your brother chose to go with a Suffolk breed. And when did you two guys start with the Capielaw Suffolks?
We started up in 1997. It was really from the demise of the Stonefield Hill flock post sort of Maidi Visna breakdown, which was 1997. The Maidi Visna was at such a level within the Stonefield Hill flock at that time that it looked as if there was no road back for both the Texels and the Suffolks. So the Suffolks were very much playing second fiddle to the Texels, so it was an opportunity for Gavin and I to start on our own, and we there was a little farm down the road called Capielaw, which was owned by a friend of ours, Hugh Hunter, and he said, look, there's 7 acres there in a shed if you want to get going. It was only literally about 3/4 of a mile down the road. Just get going if you want. So yeah, it was the catalyst really. We went down to, always admired Jack Bulmer of the Malton flock. Jack, as you remember obviously from your Smithfield days, Andy, great supporters of the prime stock. Mm-hmm. And I suppose very much similar to ourselves, and great commercial foundation to Suffolks, and we always admired the quality of the females he had in the Malton flock when they went to the shows and sales. Jack always said he cost himself a fortune in principle by following commercial traits and not going to extremities to try and produce the golden sheep for Stoneleigh or Edinburgh, and he's probably right, I suppose.
Let's just discuss then, and that wouldn't have been an easy time to get into the breed, because to get into the top of the breed back then, in the late 90s anyway, you'd need a lot of money to get to.
Yeah, a lot of people who start up flocks of cattle and sheep, it takes them a while to establish a type within their herd or their flock, and we thought we'd probably eat into a bit of ground with that on that front by actually buying them all off the one place. So we bought 5 ewes and 2 ewe lambs on that dispersal day. So really, we effectively had a flock that had a type straight away. And I think that probably reflected on the lambs we got going with the first couple of years at Kelso. Because by 2002, 2002 we were first in the ring at Kelso, and our first lamb through the ring was 2,000, and we averaged 690 for 6 lambs, and they were all still at that stage out of the molting ewe. So yeah, it was a great start.
Well, you were certainly paid back straight away, and you went on, I know, to win the Royal Highland Show. I can't remember what year it was, but
we personally didn't win it, Andy. We sold a ewe lamb to the mayors from Devoninside who bought JTO H28, which is one of the sort of, there's two or three ewes that were milestones of the breed in the late 90s and the early millennium. And K79 would be one from the mayors, and H28 was probably ours. In this 2000, she was born 2006, and she won the Highland Show as a gimmer. The mayors bought her off us as a ewe lamb at St Boswell's female sale, and they came back with her the next year as a gimmer, and she won the Highland Show. She was champion Suffolk in 2007 as a gimmer, and she came back in 2008 and was champion again, and she was reserving to breed that year to a Charlie of the Ingrams of Logirno, and then she came back 2 following years after that, and she won the U class for 4 years in the trot. Wow. She was first prize U at the Highland Show. So that in itself is no mean feat, really, is it?
That's incredible. And Scott, you never really went down that Aberdeenshire route of the big bones and chasing the heads and the top prices. And what's your take on those sheep's impact on the Suffolk breed?
Without being too disrespectful to anybody, Andy, I mean, there's no right animal to breed, no wrong animal to breed, but our sort of projected vision for what we wanted to achieve was Kelso, and we never deviated from that, to be honest. My take on it is that there's different strokes for different folks. The Suffolk Society sales of Edinburgh, Stirling, and now Lanark, very much there's a big demand there for out and out power, big heads and big legs, and obviously growthy lambs too, but for me, I've just watched the commercial men walking away from those sales over the years, getting fewer and fewer coming forward, and there was a perception that your fastest growing lambs were always at Stirling and Shrewsbury or Stoneleigh every year, and that was the place to get the best commercial lambs. But I think, every breed sometimes has to go through a bit of tough love to come out the other side and realise where they've gone wrong and reflect on that and get to where they need to be. And for us, our focus has always been Kelso. Kelso has always been a place where the commercial farmer comes to buy in one day. And there's an opportunity at Kelso to sell sheep to breeders and commercial men in one day. And yeah, we never went for these out and out extreme animals, because our focus has always been, I'd rather sell 12 lambs in one day to average £1,000 than one lamb for 12,000 and struggle and give the rest away because it's snakes and ladders. If you don't get that lamb away for 12,000 at the pedigree sale, when the commercial man doesn't really want it either in most cases. So there's always been a good trade, Andy. Our focus has been very much the Suffolk female breeders, the Suffolk cross female breeders, and those guys will come to Kelso and pay between 700 and £1,000 for a Suffolk ram with a great skin, silky hair, and a good carcass to it, as long as it's correct in its legs and got a good mouth.
And you certainly had a successful year's trading this year, Scott, and I think Kelso last week, and you had some trade there. Yeah,
thanks, Andy. We did. We averaged 770, which I think is much the same as it was 2 years ago. Lambs is a very fickle market now, Andy. There's more and more people now want to come and buy shearlings and just take them home and chuck them out with the rest of their tups. Sure. And unless you've got a USP with lambs, it's very difficult to try and carve out a marketplace and create a demand. And 4 years or 5 years ago at Kelso, I was standing with the CEO of the Suffolk Society then, a man called Lewis McClinton, and there was two guys came up and said to us, "God, we love your lambs. We're coming to your pen every year, but we need to buy recorded lambs because that's what we that's part of our shopping list. And unless they're recorded, we don't buy them." And when he walked away, Lewis said to us, guys, I bet if you recorded your Suffolks, you'd probably have really good figures because they've always been very commercial and very good carcasses on them, and I bet your figures are good. And I thought about it when I went home, and I thought, do you know what? If that's the only thing stopping people from buying our sheep, and perhaps it might open doors to us in other areas. So we gave it a whirl, and actually, do you know what? It was the best thing I've ever done, because we started not only back fat scanning, we started CT scanning, and that's real currency. It gave us a real USP. I mean, we're the only pen of lambs at Kelso that do have CT scanned lambs, and without going into too much of a detail, CT scanning's the full body scans that you go through, and it gives you real-time data that you can then turn around and convert it into a real currency that farmers understand. Like, we have a ram there with the highest killing out percentage, we have a ram with the longest spinal length, the lamb with the highest Jiggett score. These are all things people can relate to, Andy, and I think without being too critical of Signet or any of these performance recorded schemes, we get a phenomenal amount of data back. But in many ways, it sometimes clogs the system up, and people can't see through that data to get to the real facts that they can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had this conversation with Malcolm Stewart, who you've had on, and Malcolm and I are of the same mindset that we think you've got 30 seconds from when somebody turns up at your pen to match what they want with what you've got.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know your sheep inside out, and you say to the guy, "What are you looking for?" "Well, I've got North of England mules." "Well, you know straight away, I'm looking for a Suffolk Tup." You need something with a bit of a plus for fat. You need something that's going to carry a bit of fat, has a tight skin, and is going to grow really quickly off grass, so has to be a phenomenal daily live weight gain. So you can match these guys up, and with a bit of confidence. I'll tell you something interesting. A couple of years ago, we had a family who have a Wagyu beef business down in the north of England, in Cumbria. And they wanted to roll their successful Wagyu business into the retail trade, to the sheep business they've got as well. So they came all the way from Cumbria, and they asked me where the ram was, which number was the ram with the highest marbling score in its meat.
Right.
And I said, "It's that ram there," and they went, "Right," and they just came and bought it and went home.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself just shows that people get that stuff. It works for them.
And would I be right in saying that I was involved with computers, as you know, probably in the beginning of when the figures came in, and there were some very skewed figures, and they didn't mean anything to anybody, apart from the few people with the likes of Alan Jackson at Rugby. These people that understood the figures and how they were going forward, but a lot of people would come to the sales and they had no idea what these figures meant. And would I be right in saying the figures now have become honest? Is that the right word? And people understand what they mean.
Andy, I think to answer your question, I think the figures have always been honest, Andy. I think they've been rejigged. I know I've been on the other side of the fence. I actually was farmed out when I worked for Britbreed. I was farmed out for 2 months of the year to be a back fat scanner with Signet. So I've been on the other side of the fence as well.
Sure.
And that was in the early 2000s and late 90s. And at that time, there was far too much emphasis put on lean meat production, and they actually used to penalise the fat lambs too much. So what you used to find was that the lambs that you want, and we still want, are the ones that were laying down maybe 3 or 4 or 5 mils of fat, because they are actually the ones that are going to perform off grass really well.
Sure.
And so their offspring will as well.
Sure.
So there was unofficially part of my job with Signet was to get bookings in the book for going around back fat scanning, and latterly ended up being a recruitment process, because a lot of people were saying, "Oh, I'm not doing any more Scott. My best lambs are getting penalised too much because they're laying down a bit extra fat and it's getting hammered. They're getting hammered as a result." So Signet, to their credit, listened to people, and they rejigged a little bit how they were scoring fats. So now if you've got a fat of 3 or 4 mils, everybody now is looking to buy a ram with a plus for fat, which is great, because we're now looking to produce and finish lambs off grass. And if you've got rams with a plus for fat, that you're all the way, and you'll get your lambs off the ground really quickly. And to answer your question, figures have always been honest. I think what we've all been guilty of as recorded flocks is sticking these cards up above the pen and standing there and expecting people to understand them.
Yeah.
And I think that part of our job is actually to put it into layman's terms so people understand it, because like I said earlier, we have an amazing amount of information, and much of it is really good information, but we just have to pluck out the wee gems and feed it to people who are and match it with what people are looking for. And I think that's not just Signet's job, that's our job too, as breeders, to take that information we've got, which is unique to our individual flocks, and match it with what people are coming to buy rams from your pen at Kelso.
It's an education, isn't it? You're dead right. And you mentioned Marky Stewart just now, and of course Malcolm dispersed the flock quite recently, and I believe you bought a couple of his top gimmers out of there, and they'd be good honest sheep, wouldn't they, from Sandy now, much as yourself? And
Oh, phenomenal, Andy. I mean, I bought 2 ewes actually. They weren't gimmers. I went after a gimmer. Unfortunately, I was outbid, but I got a couple of really good breeding ewes, and ewes that had left daughters in the flock went very well. And that was the 26th of July Malcolm sale. I've brought them home here. They're just running the grass beside my own ewes. Malcolm was up last weekend dropping a couple of sheep off for somebody who had bought them. I was going through for Jack Lamb actually. Jack Lamb bought a couple of ewes, and I shared a bull with Jack, and I was going through to pick it up, and took Jack's ewes through to him. They'd bought at Malcolm's dispersal. So Malcolm said to Malcolm, "Come and have a look at your ewes." So they've been here for 6 weeks, and we reckon they've put on about 10 kilos each, and they're just incredible meat machines. They just do exactly what it says in the tin.
Yeah, sure. So moving on from the sheep, Scott, I think yourself and your wife Jane also keep a few Highland cattle, and how did that come about? What are your plans for those?
Well, there was a kind of reason to get in the Highland cattle. It was to keep Jane off horseback. Jane's had a very successful in her own right career with horses. She's been down at Wembley she was a member of the Eglinton team of old when she was a kid growing up in the pony club, and a very able horsewoman in her own right. And she had, sadly, about 12 years ago, she had a really bad ox accident and a horse fell off her horse here at home, and fortunately I was here, and she had a bleed on the brain, ended up in hospital in intensive care. And I suppose had a second chance, but was told absolutely no chance was she allowed to go back on a horse because she obviously has a weakness there now, and she could have another bleed in the brain. So she had a great admiration for Highland cows, so to try and keep her off horseback or anywhere near a horse, the sort of part of the deal was, right, we'll get some Highland cows. And we got some Highland cows at the start, and because we've got a lot of young grass here on the farm and they're running amongst the Suffolks, there was a real opportunity there to try and, once we got a handle on how Highland cows were going to go, they're just butterballs off grass, Andy. They get fat and fresh air. So originally the cows we bought came with beef shorthorn calves at foot from Castle Estates, from a guy called Danny McLaughlin, who's a great guy actually, he manages Castle Estates. And these were cracking cows, big commercial Highland cows, big deep bodies on them, and not many of them had the fancy fringes that you pay big money for, but they were just built for purpose. And you'll quite often see Castle Estates' name up in lights in Oban at the Suckle calf sales in October, selling cows at 6-month-old calves off the mothers at 700-800 quid, which is tremendous actually. Sure. And we thought, we're just onto something here. So we started killing these bullocks privately, putting them through the local butchers like Matheson's in Edinburgh, Forsyth and Peebles, and Mary Howlett from Going Native down in Hawick, with really, really good feedback, because obviously we're not killing lots of cattle, you're able to focus and drill into what's going on. So Highland cattle with a beef shorthorn of them, you get a beast with a good killing out percentage, and our grade carcass killing out sort of 340 kilos to 350 kilos, and the marbling in the meat's phenomenal, but they do it all 100% off grass. So you've not got an ultra premium product in terms of an E or a U grade carcass, but you've got an R grade carcass, which is fairly acceptable. But the real secret with them, Andy, is they're a low cost production system, sure. And you get the added advantage of the eating quality of being 100% finished off grass with no concentrates. It's phenomenal.
And are you going down the pedigree route with him as well, Scott?
I've kind of learned that lesson. For years, Andy, I've looked across at that unregistered ring of Suffolks at Kelso and thought, yeah, you guys have got it made. We do the hard yards and the registrations and the marketing and the My Divisional memberships, and you guys just turn up with your tups and the commercial men walk away with them at big money. And I've just thought, there's no way I'm doing the same with the cattle. I mean, my brother Gavin's, he's gone down the pedigree route with Simmentals and Highlands, and he's doing fairly well with those on those fronts, showing them. But I just have no aspirations whatsoever to start dragging cattle around a yard in the front of a forklift, trying to halter break them and stuff like that.
I was looking forward to you commentating on your own cattle going down the ring at Delkeith's show.
Yeah. Well, no, we're very much we enjoy. There's a bit of mutual respect when nobody's putting halters on anybody, and they'll stand and let you cope them with a curry comb, and there's a good relationship there between the cows and ourselves at the moment. Yeah. I don't want to do anything to jeopardise that, Andy.
I've had a few relationships with Highland cows over the years, and some of them have turned out with bad consequences.
It's quite funny when we were getting our cows PD'd last autumn. Stuart Wright, the scanner, was in. He was scanning the ewes, and he usually does the cows at the same time. And he said the worst kick he ever had from a cow was actually from a Highland cow. He said she basically double barreled him in the chest, and Stuart's about 16 to 17 stone. He said he just disappeared out of eye shot, being kicked with a Highland cow.
Yeah, I did a clipping demonstration for the Queen Mother for the 200th centenary at the Highland show, and
oh, that's right, I remember that.
And these beasts had just been brought straight out the field, and just a power washer over them, and then tied up to a fence. And I was in there, and I found a photograph recently of the bloodthirsty people all standing there waiting for me to get my face kicked in by them. But great fun. And you mentioned you've been closely associated with Dalkeith Show, and I still have the wooden sheep hurdles from the old Dalkeith Show. They're in our lambing shed in France that I got from you.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, we tried to streamline things a little bit, Andy. We were with falling numbers every year. We were volunteers to come and build the show. The days of chapping a post in and tying 2 bits of string and 4 gates have long gone. We now have we share gates with Haddington Show. We now put about 400 pens up in about 2.5 hours on the Friday of the morning before the show on the Saturday.
Well, they've done well with my few sheep in France anyway. And Scott, yourself, of course, amongst the sheep breeding and the commentating, you, of course, keep a day job. And you'd have worked, I think, with James Milne, was that right? He's a good lad to learn from.
Yeah, James and I used to work for Edinburgh and started out in 1997 with Edinburgh Genetics with James Mill and John Hunter and Bill McKelvey, of course, at that time as well. And then James and John went on their own in 2000, and I went with them as their technical manager to the new company they formed called Britbreed.
Yeah.
That was great, a real education. I was an embryologist, a technician, and used to look after the ram shed as well. Basically, when they were out on the road, I would be kind of running the show back at home. Which was great.
And just to say, out on the road, you mean these guys, of course, were out on farms, embryo transplanting mainly with sheep throughout the country, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. They would start off in the sort of second week in July, actually, yeah, on Charlies, and then they would finish up with Blackies on the sort of last week in November, and of course winter time was out of season flushing, with some people now take their ewes out of production for a year, their best ewes, and flush them through the winter months, which is what we were preoccupied with. But it was great. I mean, it was also a real education on fertility as well, Andy. I mean, I was able to see the other side of the fence from people pushing animals to their maximum, to get them to sales and stuff, and then we would get them in, and you would see real issues with fertility from animals that were basically going through puberty while they're actually being forced for sales, and they were turning up at us to get semen off them. Suffolk lambs, for example, there's not other breeds are also available, should I say, but Suffolk lambs, for example, coming into Edinburgh, coming into us after that at 85, 90 kilos, and their testicles were actually like a month behind their body weight, to be honest, and just because of the real deal live weight gain they had. And it was amazing. As soon as you took them off feed, if they came in and they weren't any good, they weren't fully fertile, you just say to guys, look, take them home, take them off feed, 10 days later, bring them in, we'll retest them, and 9.5 times out of 10 they were fine. But there was a real education there that you could see that was just like, give these animals time. There was such a race to get them to the finishing line for Stirling or Edinburgh.
Yeah, indeed. And we had on the podcast a few months ago a Professor John Robertson, and who did a lot of work with Harborough regarding feed and fertility, and he very much said the same thing as well. There's a learning curve there. It's not all about a big bucket, is it?
Yeah, John's a legend. There's so much time for John. We owe so much to John, actually, in the Suffolk breed, because John was commissioned by the Society to look into why Suffolks became runny bummed, I suppose, skittery bummed in the sort of mid-90s, where they never used to be, Andy. And his findings were very to the point and very comprehensive, and he discovered that the makeup of the sheep industry had changed massively in the mid-70s and the 80s, with influx of continental sheep breeds into the UK, which were copper intolerant, and not that feed mills and feed companies were putting copper into feed, but there was a lot of ingredients had background copper. To give you an example, Invergordon Distillers Dark Grains have 32 milligrams per kilogram of copper, whereas North British don't, because they don't use copper vats. So feed companies were throttling back on copper inclusion, and as John discovered, the downside to that was you had native breeds like the Blackie, the Suffolk, the Park Cheviot, and the Blueface Leicester, all massively dependent on copper, suddenly became deficient in copper. And as soon as we redressed that balance, things have just turned a corner. We're now, most Suffolk breeders now in the UK will copper bolus their sheep twice a year, every 6 months.
Yourself now, you're involved with the Morden Institute, and tell our listeners exactly what they do and what's your involvement in that.
Well, Morden itself, Andy's just actually reached its centenary year. It was started 100 years ago by a group of farmers who were going around. They created a laboratory on the back of a bus, which actually, interesting, Morden have just redone to promote 100 years of the Morden Institute. And we're so lucky these days. We don't have to worry about back in pre-World War. farmers were losing sheep to Braxy and things like that, which we now have cover for with the vaccines we have, Ovivac P and Heptivac P. Pasturella, they were losing sheep hand over fist. And really as a result of a lot of the pioneering work that was done by Morden in its infancy, pre and post Second World War, a lot of these vaccines were developed. And sadly, well, we take these things for granted. I mean, Heptivac P is a phenomenally complex vaccine that's been made, and it does a tremendous job of actually protecting the stock that it's actually treated with. And a lot of that good work was done in the labs at Morden many years ago. Okay. Morden's now a phenomenal, globally recognised institute with world recognised individuals. You know, many field leading scientists in their areas of expertise have actually hung their hat on the hook at Morden. We're so lucky, and these guys are there to be spoken to and at any level by farmers whenever they want to, just about problems and issues that farmers have got on farms. And I think, Andy, we're very fortunate in so many ways that these guys are, as well as being immensely intelligent and expert in their fields, they're actually able to put things into layman's terms. I don't mean to be disrespectful to farmers and producers and breeders, but they're able to put things at a level where people understand them and people can relate to. And that really does get the best out of the communications from a scientific perspective back to boots on the ground and on farms. And part of my role within Morden as a regional advisor is really just, I'm in the middle as a two-way stream of information. We key in disease surveillance on farms in the area that I travel with my work and my capacity with Murray Farm Care as an animal health advisor, and also to roll back out research work that's been done at Morden, that can be utilised or just basically putting scientists in touch with farmers where there's real key issues on farms with specific disease issues.
If anybody that's in the middle of both of those, and I remember John Robinson saying the same thing, actually, to be able to communicate with the scientists and the farmers at the same time was a gift, and I'm sure you have it too there, Scott. One of the main reasons for bringing you on to the Top Lines and Tails podcast this week is to discuss your own brainchild, the We All Need a Farmer project. And for those of you who haven't seen it's a magnificent short film promoting farming in Scotland. And tell me a bit more about that, Scott, and where it came from and how it was produced.
The best way to describe it, Andy, is it was much of it came out of the real torment I could see on farm following the second lockdown in December. I mean, in the COVID pandemic, during the COVID pandemic, when we went into lockdown first time around, most farmers, Andy, as you'll be aware yourself, were actually in involuntary lockdown with lambing sheep, calving cows, or sowing grain at that time, so they weren't going out anyway. So farmers coped pretty well through the first lockdown, like that everybody else did, really. And then just the real big hit from my perspective was I finished lambing in the end of January and went back out on farm by arrangement and by appointment, seeing farmers end of January, beginning of February, and goodness me, the mood change was really, there was a real slide of poor form, low mood on farm, people really struggling with the fact that they hadn't seen anybody. They were desperate just to have some crack with anybody that was not either their family, people they work with, or they hadn't seen anybody for about 2 months. And so I sort of was quite concerned by what I'd encountered, and then that was further compounded by a friend of mine took his own life, Grant Brand, many will remember. Grant took his own life on the 12th of February this year. Grant was a lovely big guy, recently described by his brother Jamie as built like an air raid shelter, 6'5", and a smile as wide as East Lothian, just a lovely guy, and just used to light up a room with his smile and always full of good chat, And the last guy you would ever think would actually do something as devastating as that, as taking his own life and leaving behind his wife Jane and 2 boys, was just terrible. And that actually made me think, well, this is probably, and I hope I'm not right, but this could be the thin end of the wedge in terms of the mood swinging on farm and how people are actually not coping with the pandemic. So I phoned Nina Clancy, CEO of RSCBI, who I know, and I said to Nina, what are you finding? And she said, Scott, the minute the Royal Highland Show was announced as being cancelled, their phone lines were just ringing off the hook with people phoning saying, look, the Highland Show was all I had to look forward to this summer. It was my milestone of, if we can get the Highland Show, we'll meet up with people, it'll be a great crack. And that the message there is they just wanted to meet up with people. It was people coming together and chatting, and a sense of community, which there's a great sense of in our industry. And I said to Luke, I'd seen a video when I was at lambing time. I was sitting on a bale watching a ewe lamb called We All Need a Farmer by a guy called Paul Harvey, who was an American DJ, and he produced this for Dodge Ram pickups, and it was shown at halftime of the Super Bowl. And it was a beautiful production of still shots, camera shots, with a poem that he had written himself. And okay, his narration's quite quirky, and it actually was very engaging, but it was beautifully written, and it was very powerful and very engaging. And it was only 2 minutes 45 seconds long, and I thought, God, we could do this for our own guys over here. I just need to get the mechanism and just see if we can see if this thing can fly. If there's any chance of producing this, I had no idea that we could actually get this thing off the ground, and it was a massive long shot. So I spoke to Nina. I said to her, "Do you think there's any chance? Have a look at this video." And she said, "Leave it with me." So she went and poured herself a cup of coffee and watched it and phoned me back and said, "Wow, that's very powerful." And she said, "Goodness me, if we can get anything like that for our own Scottish farmers, that would be amazing." So off I went, and within a week, I knew somebody who was very friendly with Jason Connery, and a shameless use of friendships, and said, "Do you think you can get Jason to potentially help us out here if we can get this thing off the ground?" And he said, "Send me an email with what you're planning to do, and I'll speak to him." He said, "He'll do it." And I said, "How do you know he'll do it?" He said, "He'll do it because he's getting married next week. We're his witnesses for his wedding, and if he doesn't do it, he's not getting married." So,
Jason Connery, of course, being son of Sean Connery.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, "Wow, you've got some hold over the guy." And he said, "Well, if he doesn't do it, if that's not a hold over him, nothing will work." So that was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and by 7:30 that night, Jason was given my number, and he phoned me and said, "Scott, I've read your email about basically what you're finding on farm," and he said, "Anything at all I can do to help, I'm on board." And so that was great. The minute we got Jason, really, things just gathered momentum, because you had somebody who was profoundly well known, and he's also an award-winning director in his own right for his own film called Tommy's Honour, which obviously, as you'll be aware, Andy, is about the story of golf. Mm-hmm. And he won a BAFTA for it, so a very accomplished man in that field as well. So the minute we got Jason on board, things just started to, more people came to the table wanting to be on board. It's the old scenario of failure as an orphan and success as many parents, and everybody just wanted to be part of this that we approached. It was superb. So we had multiple donations of beautiful still shots from all and sundry. The credits are full of people who've donated photographic images. I then went and approached a mate of mine called Ross Montague, who works for Seen and Heard, and I told Monty what I was trying to do, and he said, it was a great idea, Scott, but he says, there's a lot of work we need to do to get this done. He said, first of all, we need somebody who's going to put this together. And I said, we've got Jason Connery, and he was like, really? And I said, yeah, he's on board. And he was like, well, that's brilliant. Well, yeah, great. And then I spoke to Fiona Clark, who's an executive producer for Landward, Neil Fiona, and told her what I was planning to do. And she said, look, Scott, the advice I can give you is don't try and recreate another Paul Harvey, because his voice is so quirky that it works. And I think if you try and recreate the same thing, it'll just be another Paul Harvey production. She said, here's a production that was written for ITV Racing to promote Cheltenham Festival, which was a Simon Mansell Broom poem, and it was done beautifully done, again using still shots and photographic images and video. And she said that's the route you should go down. Well, I mentioned it to Jason Connery, and Jason said, Fiona is spot on. That's the route we need to go down. Mm. So she said, just pay somebody to write a poem. So we were kind of thinking, we had everything in place, and we thought we've done everything but get a poet. So Monty said, look, I write the odd script for people. I've just finished doing one for Prince Charles for the Duchy, and for an article they want to do. He goes, how about we have a go ourselves? And I said, you're having a laugh. He goes, no, honestly, you just never know until you have a go. And then he says, I'll work away at my end. He said, and you see what you can do at your end. And do you know what, Andy? I don't mind telling you, we wrote the script for We All Need a Farmer in 4 hours.
Yeah.
We had 12 verses actually. We shortened it to 9, and we had a little bit of a powwow the next day. Then sent it over to Jason, expecting him to go, yeah, lads, nice try, but you really need to get a poet on board and pay somebody to do something, to write something for you. And he was very, very kind, and he emailed us back. He actually phoned me first, and he said, look, Scott, who did you get to write this? And I said, it was actually I'm sorry to tell you. I said we apologise. I said it was Monty and myself. It'll probably not be good enough, but we just had a bash at it. And he goes, I don't mind telling you. He said it's a beautifully written piece of work. And he said I wouldn't change a single thing apart from the last line on the last verse, which is, and that is why we all need a farmer. And I said seriously, and he said, yeah, I would leave it the way it is. He said, I think you've probably covered a lot of things. He said, if I can be critical at all, it's probably too long. There we go. That's how we got. And then Jason, once he realised the imagery we had and the quality of, and once he was happy with the script, he said, look guys, I think I'm happy to do the direction bit and pull it all together for you, but I really want to get somebody with a profoundly engaging Scottish voice, and I think we can get a guy called Ian Pirrie. Ian was an actor on Tommy's Honour, and he's worked with him before, and he's from Aberdeen, and he said, I'll speak to Ian. He's just finished doing The Matrix, and he'll have a bit of time in his hands, and I'll see if I can get him on board. Well, again, Ian Pirrie phoned me at night and said, Scott, I've seen the script. It's a beautifully written poem. I would love to do it. And I said, well, don't worry, Ian. It's not an interview. You've got the job. So we're just delighted to have you on board. And he's a lovely, lovely guy. Ian's from Aberdeen. One of his best friends was from a farming empire in Aberdeenshire, or his best friend at the time was from a farming empire in Aberdeenshire. The father died at a young age at 42, and the eldest son of this farming dynasty was his best mate. And sadly, he couldn't cope with the pressure of being handed the reins, and again, he took his life, and Ian's never gotten over it, really. So, and he's just said,
perfect match,
it resonated with me totally, and he said, that's why I want to be part of this, because he said, I think it's such a good message that it puts out.
I'm guessing all this was, or most of this anyway, was voluntary contributions. There wouldn't be too great a cost to this.
Well, everybody involved donated their skill set to it, and that included the photograph imagery. We didn't pay anybody for it. I mean, even Tom Lyne was a friend of mine in the area. He's a jazz artist in his own right, and also he's got his own company called Aspects of Sound. Tom actually pulled the video together, put it all together, and actually he wrote the music for the film. So, and he donated his music to it as well. So everything was done with a budget of zero.
Just tell our listeners, Scott, exactly where they can find this if they want to look to see this program. And
well, if you go onto YouTube, folks, and if you type in "We All Need a Farmer," it'll come up. Seen and Heard, the production and marketing company who promoted it, and it's there. They've put it on there, so you can find it on there. But it's actually just been adopted by Movember, the people with the moustaches, who obviously promote prostate cancer men, awareness to prostate cancer in men. They want to move in now to the promoting mental health awareness, and there's a very successful organisation called Farm Strong New Zealand is now being brought to Scotland in November. It's going to be called Farm Strong Scotland, and they're going to use our video to promote and frontline the awareness of Farm Strong Scotland. So they have around 15 million followers. Movember have, so I think it's going to get plenty of exposure just around the corner, Andy.
Brilliant, Scott. A great achievement to you, and it's obviously, as you say, going global, and there's a lot more to go with this yet. And fantastic, well done to that. A round of applause to you, fella. And
thanks, fella.
The time's moving on, and the other subject that a sport that we both share and love, and I know this is a livestock podcast, but we both love the rugby, and I seem to recall you were quite a successful rugby player, Scott. We'll just have a quick recap of just what you achieved in that sport.
Yeah, well, I played most of my rugby at Watsonians, although I went to Heriots. I took great pleasure, and a lot of friends went to Watsonians, and that's where I went. And funnily enough, all the time I played for Watsonians, I never lost a game against Heriots. It was superb. And my real passion, if I'm honest, Andy, in playing rugby was the sevens circuit. I played in every sevens circuit in the Borders except for Melrose, because people used to come out the woodwork and come back to training to go to Melrose, and I used to get given the nudge, not even onto the bench, just right out the window. And Gav, my brother, very successful sevens player, he's got a plaque on. He's got I think it was something in the region of about 20 or 23 winners and runners-up medals in Borders sevens, Kings of the Sevens circuit. So I played a lot of I did 2 or 3 years of the sevens circuit with Gav for Watsonians. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I left. I kind of retired through my commitment to work at 33, and then Gav carried on at Watson's, and he got to a couple of Scottish Cup finals and won it with Watson's in 2002, I think it was, or 2006, sorry, at Watson's, and just did very well. And then we both got asked to come back to Last Wade because they sold a pitch for development and had big plans and aspirations, which was a club we used to play mini rugby for as kids. And they wanted to have their aspirations to go right back up through the leagues. So we both, Gav came from Watsonians back to Last Wade. I came out of retirement, and we did 4 divisions in 5 years, 3 of them as champions. And then the pièce de résistance for me, I suppose, and signing off in style was getting to the Shield final at Murrayfield in 2010 with Last Wade, and both Gavin and myself in the same team. I've got a picture of me in the changing rooms with the medal in the neck, the boots hung up on the hook, and job done, signed off at 40, still playing first team rugby. So yeah, for me, I don't think I could have asked much more. I was relatively injury free right through my rugby days, and the worst thing I ever did was stop because my body felt a bit the minute I stopped playing.
Brilliant.
So,
and I know what goes on tour stays on tour, but have you got a rugby tale for us just to finish up here?
yeah, quite amusing one. We went to we went to the Twickenham with Watsonians, and Scott Hastings was organising the trip. And the true Scott Hastings organisational skills, which was always nil. Yeah, I've got this, and you get there and there's nothing organised. He'd sorted tickets for us to go, and we'd asked for 18 tickets. Well, he'd managed to get us 8. So we're standing in the Orange Tree in Richmond, and he said, "Guys, you'll have to come outside. I've got some news for you. I've been to London Scottish to pick up tickets, and we've only got 8. And those of you who had to go on tour first will obviously get first chance tickets, of which Gavin and I weren't." She said, "The rest of you will have to try and get your own tickets if you want to go." So 2 old guys were walking past with kilts on and said, "Anybody looking for tickets?" And Gav literally like sprungboard from where he was to where these guys were and said, "Yeah, here, we're looking for tickets. How many have you got?" And this guy said, "Oh, I've just got 2. But can he go for whatever reason?" He said, you can have these 2. And I said, "Oh, brilliant, we'll take them. What do you want for them?" "Oh, just what we paid for them, which was at the time was 35 quid. So we gave them 40 quid a piece, and we were just tickled pink. And as it turned out, we were the only guys on tour beyond the 8 who had tickets that actually got to go. So we all went to Twickenham together, although we weren't sitting together, and had a beer in the bar upstairs at Twickenham. And then 5 minutes before kickoff, thought, well, it's time we started maybe getting our seats. So they all went off to the East Stand, and then we never actually looked at our tickets. And we came out the bar, went downstairs, got our tickets out of our sporrans and looked at it, and it just said enclosure, and didn't say anything else. And we said, "Oh, right, enclosure." So we actually ran right round Twickenham and couldn't see anywhere that we're meant to be going to get our seats. And there's this guy standing, with the Group 4 securities with the green jacket on, and said, "You look a bit lost, guys." We said, "Yeah, we've got these tickets, we don't know where we're going." And he goes, "Well, you better hurry up, the game's about to kick off." And he opened the big gate where you get the Arctics onto the pitch, and when they're doing pitch maintenance, and said, "Right, get in here." So he took us right along the side of the pitch to literally either side of the tunnel, and there was 2 seats right in the front of the pitch. And by this time the teams are out singing the national anthem. Well, at that time Duncan Hodge was our club mate, so was Jason White, and those guys were they could see us sitting down in the in the front row of seats, and they did everything but short of pointing at us. And we sat down and we were kind of high-fiving us, and I said, "Oh, the guys will never believe this. We've managed to get seats. Not only have we got tickets, but we've got right in the front row, right at the side of the tunnel." And Gav's like, "Before you see too much more, just look left and right and tell me what you see." And I was like, "Oh, who cares? Look where we're sitting." He goes, "Honestly, just take a quick look and tell me tell me what you see." So I had a quick look, and yeah, we were sitting in the disabled area, 2 of us. And the guy who comes round, the English guy, comes round with the bulldog under the arm and waving the English flag. He came round, saw us, and sort of gave us a big thumbs up. Nice seats, guys. So yeah, the word had got back to the boys actually before we got back to Richmond to the Orange Tree. Duncan Hodge actually texted the boys and said, "Did any of you see where Scotty and Gav Brown were sitting? They were sitting right in the front row in the disabled area, just to the side of the tunnel." And so when we got back, they went, "Can't believe you guys had your seats." But no, it was a good trip, and it always is down there. As you know yourself, Andy, it's a great part of, beyond playing the rugby, the supporting of it's a great side of it, isn't it?
Absolutely is. You're right, and rugby is a great thing to bring people together. And talking of bringing people together, we better talk about Scotland's chances in the Rugby World Cup in a couple of years. Scott got a fair chance, I think, and obviously it's down in my country, down in France. You're going to get yourself down here?
Yeah, time will tell, Andy. Time will tell. It's tempting. Obviously, it's not that far from home. Yeah, I think, there's a lot of water under the bridge between now and then, and so much of your fortunes on how a team gets on in the World Cup depends on who else's, their run of form goes. You see teams in the past that like this English team that won the World Cup in 2003. They basically just gather momentum from when Clive Woodward took over to that end point of the World Cup champions in that year. And we've seen South Africa do it, we've seen New Zealand do it, we've seen Australia do it. Scotland, yeah, I think we need maturity on our side. We need guys that are going to can play for 90 minutes and not panic and get in the green zone and keep the ball up the jersey or keep it in the van and not panic until they get across the line with it. We've got an amazing skill set in the backs now. We've got really talented backs and we've got a great pack as well. We've actually got depth now, which is really important because you get guys. Complacency doesn't creep in. Nobody's jersey is safe anymore, Andy. It's really quite exciting. And
brilliant to speak to you, Scott. With regards to the World Cup, the opening game is in Marseille, and Wendy and I have our tickets already. If you get yourself down there, Scotland are playing South Africa on the opener, as you know, and England and Argentina the same weekend. But I believe it clashes with Kelso Topsail, so that might be you out the window.
Oh, there you go. See, yeah. Unless you want to come over and sell my tups, Andy, and I'll go over and watch the rugby.
The tups will sell themselves there, Scott. Don't you worry.
Do you think, before you go, honestly, on behalf of everybody who listens to your podcast, you've been the subject of much discussion off the air. We're all immensely grateful, really, Andy, that you've pulled together Top Lines and Tails, because it has really brought a shining light into some of the dark rooms that we've been living in during COVID over the last 18 months. And it's brought people together from a distance, if that makes sense, and has been, the subject of much chat. So when you're being talked about, you must be doing something right. So well done again, Andy.
That's brilliant of you, Scott, to say that. Thank you very much, and I've really enjoyed a yarn with you. I've been trying to get you on the line for a while there, and brilliant to chat to you. And you and I'll catch up for a beer very soon.
Look forward to that. I'll hold you to it. You're buying, by the way.
Of course. Cheers, Scott.
Cheers, Andy.
You.
Thank you for listening to this week's podcast, which was kindly sponsored by Harbro, suppliers of quality commercial and pedigree feeds and expert nutritional advice. Visit their website or find them on Facebook for more information. And while on the subject of Facebook, why don't you visit the Top Lines and Tails Facebook page, where you'll find photographs and more information to back up this episode.